Yep, yet another anime girl glass pad. This is the Kanami Yuna, a limited edition glass pad that was dropped on January 26 with a cost of $75 with a total of 400 units. This is Konami's first glass pad and the third overall drop, following the Nana and Naifu. I'll give you guys a quick overview about the packaging, performance, and comparison versus some other popular glass pads to let you guys know if there's any major differences between them and if there's any close competition or alternatives you should consider. So, just a quick announcement, Konami did not send the pad out to me, so all my thoughts and opinions will be my own. Now, let's get into the main review. First, I want to talk about packaging. The unboxing experience is very similar to the GameSense Sonar or the old Pat Smith Empress packaging. But the box art is the most favorite thing to me about this pad. The art is based off the traditional Japanese schoolgirl outfit, and the colors and design of it is very different to other anime glass pads, which is really nice. But if we're talking about the pad art itself, I personally like the art of the Empress, or if we're going something more anime style, the Shiny Yume is a bit more down my alley due to its very minimal and clean design. But the Yuna is definitely still a very interesting design and one of my more favorite glass pad design wise. Also, if anyone is interested in the artist they commissioned, this is their Twitter. I put their socials down below if anyone wants to check them out further. When you first open the package, you see some stickers, a basic one with the Konami logo, a smaller sticker with the unit art right here and the special number you received, and a bigger sticker with just the unit art itself. And of course, you get a thank you card from the Konami team. I want to make a quick little note about the protection foam. There is no actual cutout in the foam itself to keep the pad in place. So in theory, it can move a small amount in shipping and kind of like hit the edges of the box, but I doubt it. Also, the pad itself does come covered in a white plastic bag with a little plastic peel covering the base to make sure the base stays fresh and to keep all dust and hair off the pad during shipping. When it comes to the dimension of the Yuna, it's the standard size, 490 by 420, nothing really out of the ordinary. But for the base of the pad, it's a custom white silicone base, very similar to that of the Superglide. It has a logo in the middle right here. It has some simple angled lines just accenting the rest of the base. For how sticky the base is, it's literally a rock. I'm pulling really hard on the pad right here, and it's barely budging at all. So during regular gameplay, it should be no problem. For the unit's performance without a sleeve, for me, it performed decently well. When I was testing it, my forearm barely stuck to the pad. I did have some issues with like the bottom portion of my wrist sticking though, as I do get some little hand sweats after an hour or so of playing. It kind of forced me to change the way I rested my hand on the pad and grip my mouse. So instead of kind of like utilizing my wrist to help stabilize my aim, I just slightly shift up where my palm was, resting on the mouse, and I also kind of like drop my elbow down to help me lift up my wrist off the pad itself. You could just wear a sleeve with like a glove portion, or buy something like an artist glove or or the Pulsar hand glove. But I like the feel of the mouse on the base of my palm, so I kind of like stay away from them. It's really nothing too major, and I did get used to it after a couple hours on my first glass pad. But some other people might have the same issue as me, and it might be a deal breaker to them when they're first trying out a glass pad. When I do wear a sleeve with the Yuna, depending on the material, it does slightly affect the friction of the Yuna on my arm slightly. Example would be the H4X sleeve or the Skypad sleeve, which is mainly made up of polyester or the sleeves that have that kind of like synthetic fabric feel to it, compared to something that's made up mainly of spandex, like the precision spandex sleeve, or like a cheap Amazon one size fits all, or just a sock or a hoodie. I felt that the polyester sleeve speed on the surface was slightly faster. If I were to try to contextualize the speed, polyester feels around 10 to 15% faster than spandex. Obviously, not as different compared to cloth pads, but I still feel there's a slight difference between them. Now, moving on to the surface. If you want my honest opinion on the surface, it's basically a super glide. I have the Koi-Fish Super Glide here, and the surface texture and feel is basically almost identical. I do want to note that my Super Glide does feel slightly faster than both my Skypad 3.0s in both the static friction and dynamic friction, so maybe not all super glides will give you the same results as me. For the hair and dust issue on the Yuna, it handles it really well. I haven't noticed any huge scratchiness when dust or hair kind of like randomly appears on the pad, so it's really nothing to worry about. If we're talking about speed, the best way I could describe the speed for anyone who hasn't had any experience with glass pads before with that the Yuna's surface is fast enough that makes it almost uncontrollable. The dynamic friction on glass is the main issue I struggled with at first to get used to, but just playing it on it for like a couple of weeks and trading smoothness with it, it was pretty easy to get used to. But if I were to describe the surface in perspective of a person who already had experience with a glass pad before, is that it would be on the higher end of balance with a slight open feeling on the dynamic friction. It's slightly too slippery on dot skates that when I try to go for like wide angle flicks and static or target switching, I feel that I have to use a bit more tension than I feel comfortable with on my arm to kind of like slow down my flicks. But with like pad skates, I feel it makes the pad the best feeling version of it you could get, as it kind of like slows down both the static and dynamic friction, but it allows me to feel free in my flicks and still be in control without like exerting too much extra tension to help me slow down. When I rub my arm on both the pads, I get that slightly textured feedback and kind of slight sticky feeling on both the pads. It kind of reminds me of those like slides you used to go down in the playground as a kid, and when your skin slightly came in contact with it, it kind of like skid and slow you down. It's really not to that extent, but it kind of resembles that same feeling. If I was comparing the thickness of the Superglide to the Yuna, my Yuna does feel slightly thicker than my Superglide, but it could just be like unit to unit variance between both the pads. For the edge of the pads, it kind of has like that sideways semicircle, very similar to that of the Glaze, Superglide, of course, and Skypad. Okay, now getting to the comparisons. If we're comparing the Superglide to the Yuna, my honest opinion is that the Superglide is slightly faster, but the texture plus feel is almost 1-to-1. I'm not 100% sure if it's factually true, but it's really close. If I compare this friction on both pads with like Yanzi dots, the stack friction feels around 10% faster and around 15 to 20% faster on the dynamic friction. With pad skates though, the stack friction feels very similar to each other. The dynamic friction does feel slightly slower on the Yuna, maybe like around 5 to 10%. So if you really want like the feeling of the Yuna, get a Superglide. Also, do remember my Superglide is faster than my Skypad 3.0, so maybe the unit is what a Skypad should have felt like. But again, it could be down to QC, and I don't really have any definitive way of kind of like testing and contextualizing the friction with numbers. So for the Skypad 4.0, I did not buy one yet, as I'm waiting for some of the limited drops. But here's Sugi, and he'll be do a quick comparison for you guys.
Hey guys, Sugi here. I'll be doing the SP004 comparison because Zalek is a fucking broke boy. Anyway, so yeah, two things. One, the SP004 ever so slightly longer than the Yuna, and by ever so slightly, what I mean is let's just take the Yuna here. Also, Yuna goat pad. My general thoughts: this shit slaps. It's amazing. I'm just gonna stop yapping. Right. Fuck. Man, I really need to pick up weights to actually get this shit. So as you can see, edge to edge, the Yuna is actually a little bit smaller than the Skypad, roughly about insert actual number here. And yeah, I mean, in terms of the surface, it's a very fast surface. On the Skypad, way faster. So as you can see on the Kanami Yuna, I'm using the Zalpin Z2 with edge runner dots. As you can see, glides very consistently with a little bit of control. Now with the SP004, way faster, way less controlled, sort of hockey puck-esque. The surface texture difference, the SP04 does feel a little bit softer to the skin. I don't feel as much texture on the pad. It does feel a little bit more slippery. So in terms of, say, the angle test instead of the dynamic friction, as you can see here, jerry-rigged a little solution here. Everything I do is scuffed. And yet, Zelek's out here asking me for the fucking glass pad content. So, SP004, try not to break my fucking mouse. Good one, Sugi. And then with the Kanami Yuna, God, this looks so scuffed to Zelek. I'm sorry, in the edit, this is going to look terrible, but I can actually fucking make this more professional. It's a lot slower, quite consistently so. That's with the edge runner dots. And then, for instance, take something like the Obsidian Bros, which I've got here on my Ninjaso Katana Super Light. the dynamic friction makes this pad way slower than pretty much most glass pads I've ever tried. Overall, the two pads are similar, and with the Yuna, it is a little bit more on the side of balance over sort of say a speed pad. So not as fast as something like say a Skypad 3.0, or not quite as fast as something like a Pulsar Superglide. The Yuna does quite frankly just hit different. Anyway, Zelik, thanks. Thanks for letting me help out. Spin. Also, sub to Zelik.
For the Skypad 3.0 with dots, the static and dynamic friction both feels around 10% faster. For pad skates, the static friction is slightly faster, like around 5% on the Skypad, and the dynamic friction is roughly the same for both the pads. Texture-wise, the Skypad is just ever so slightly more textured than the Yuna. The Skypad 3.0 is pretty close in speed, but having the issues with kind of like sweat and your arm sticky and that dust issue on skates, I would just look for a Superglide on eBay or Mouse Market if anyone is selling it less than MSRP. I wish I could compare the Yuna to the Empress also, but yeah. But from my memory, the Glaze and the Empress speeds are pretty similar to each other, but the Empress does have a slight bit more texture. I can't really recall like the exact difference in speed between them, but if you do have the chance to get a Glaze or the Empress, I would highly recommend it. If I'm comparing the Glaze to the Yuna, I would call the Glaze both smoother and slightly slower in both the static and dynamic friction, and kind of like my textbook definition of a smooth, balanced glass pad. To me, this is what I'm looking for in a glass pad. A pad that has just enough static friction that allows me to feel kind of like comfortable in static and switching scenarios, while not being too open and loose. With the Obsidian pads on the Yuna and Glaze, I feel that the static friction of both are very similar, but the dynamic is a tad bit faster on the Yuna, roughly like maybe 10%. And Dot gives roughly the same experience too. So my overall thought on the Yuna is that it's a really nice, slightly faster, balanced glass pad. When you get an extremely fast glass pad, your mouse skates will have a lot less friction compared to your arm on the pad. So it starts to feel like if my arm is kind of like lagging behind my mouse movements. So that's why I enjoy using kind of like pad skates on glass pads. Even though it has some inconsistencies with wear, I feel it adds that slight amount of control to make glass pads usable to me. If the pad's static friction is like too slow and it kind of like feels like sticky, I switch to dots then to overcome that like feeling. So the performance and the design that the unit provides you for at $75, I would say that it's a really nice pad for the price. Again, if you want to feel the surface of the Yuna, I recommend to pick up a Superglide. It's the closest thing I could recommend to this pad. I hope you guys enjoyed this review and comparison of the Yuna. If you guys do have any like questions about like arm sleeves or glass pads, I'll try my best to answer it. And yeah, make sure you guys subscribe and see you guys around. Peace.